Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazzi here, and this is going to be my 9.0 Shadowlands pre-patch Affliction Warlock DPS guide. In it, we're going to be covering the changes to Affliction in Shadowlands pre-patch, the new rotations, openers, essences, I guess the same essences, but new essence combinations, Azerite talents, how they've changed, and not really corruption, because corruption is thankfully gone in pre-patch. Any weak auras, profiles, or add-ons you see here are available to you guys for free on my Twitch if you want to swing by. Drop a follow, hang out, grab them anytime, ask any questions. Now, I will say Affliction is the spec that has received the most changes heading into Shadowlands. It's similar to the way that it is in BFA still, but also a bit different, with Malefic Rapture really changing the toolkit a decent bit. So with that being said, let's get right into the 9.0 Shadowlands pre-patch Warlock Affliction guide. So starting off with Affliction Warlock and the changes that we've received in 9.0 Shadowlands pre-patch, number one is that all Warlock specs have curses. Curse of Tongues, Curse of Weakness, and Curse of Exhaustion have returned. Curse of Recklessness was around for a little while, however it was removed in a recent PTR/beta build. Demonic Circle has gone baseline. In its place, we now have Howl of Terror, which is an instant cast 40-second CD with a fear, essentially an AOE fear. We also have the return of Fel Domination, which makes your next Imp, Voidwalker, Succubus, Fel Hunter, or Felguard, basically every pet available to you, instant cast. Essentially, it's about a 0.5 second cast, but it also has a 0 soul shard cost on it, meaning if your pet dies in combat or you've died and have no shards left, you can pop your Fel Domination and pull your pet back out quickly. Getting into the Affliction changes here. So the first thing that we see is a new ability called Malefic Rapture. Malefic Rapture is our new soul shard spender. Unstable Affliction no longer costs a soul shard. It has had its duration increased to 16 seconds, which becomes 21 seconds once you reach level 56 in Shadowlands. For the most part, it's not going to be a thing in pre-patch. However, a 16-second duration increase to Unstable Affliction is essentially doubling its previous duration. It no longer costs a soul shard, but it gives you a soul shard if the target dies being affected by Unstable Affliction. So if you're playing Drain Soul in combination with Unstable Affliction, it gives you a lot of shard generation heading from pack to pack, or if multiple mobs are dying on a boss. This change is pretty powerful. Getting back to Malefic Rapture, though, this is our new soul shard spender. Your damaging periodic effects erupt on all targets, causing 253 shadow damage per effect. Now, per effect means per dot application, meaning if all you have is an Agony up, it'll deal 253 damage. If you have Agony and Corruption up, it's going to deal 506 damage. And it goes from there. 3 dots, 780, whatever the math is on it. It is indeed affected by our Mastery as well. This is a recent change, I guess about a month and a half ago, to be honest, on beta. So there is a bit of a scaling thing there as well. More Mastery, more Rapture damage, all of that. But for the most part, Rapture makes up a very large portion of our damage as a whole playing Affliction Warlock. Getting into the talents here for the most part, the first row here is Nightfall, Inevitable Demise. The Azerite trait has now become a talent, and Drain Soul. Nightfall in the most recent version of Shadowlands beta does stack to 2. It was bugged and then fixed, and now it's bugged again. So we're not sure if it's working that properly or not, but it was recently stacking to 2, which is a change from earlier in BFA. To the same extent, before pre-patch, Nightfall did not scale proc rate-wise, with more corruptions being active. However, that was changed very, very early on in Shadowlands Alpha, so Nightfall gains more value in Council, Mythic Plus, those consistent AOE-based applications, scenarios. Inevitable Demise has indeed become a talent. If you notice here, Deathbolt is now a PvP talent, thankfully. So Inevitable Demise has replaced Deathbolt. Now, there is still the Inevitable Demise Azerite trait. Up until very recently, they weren't working together. The actual talent was overriding the Azerite trait. Well, in the most recent version of PTR, they have combined the talent and the Azerite trait to deal, a stacking amount of damage. This hits really hard. Having 3 ID traits and the talent, it hits really, really hard. Now, as far as like Cascading Calamity, single target versus stacking ID, not really sure at this point, but they're both certainly contenders, and ID has gained value. The thing is, if you take ID, you don't have access to Drain Soul here in the first row. Now, Drain Soul is essentially the same thing. Most of the large execute damage amps and things, you see those more, well, you will be seeing those more in Shadowlands if you're taking the Necrolord Covenant. But for the most part, staying in pre-patch, Drain Soul is pretty much the same way that it is. 100% damage increase on targets below 20% health. The target gives you a Soul Shard if you're channeling Drain Soul when it dies. 25 row, Writhe in Agony. There's a bit of a change here. It now stacks to 18 stacks instead of 15. So it gives you a bit more damage when taking this talent, which, to be fair, I think it was sort of needed. You really didn't take this much in earlier BFA unless you were playing like triple sudden onset in Mythic Plus. And while I did really enjoy that build, I think Writhe did need a buff, also looking at how Rapture scales with more dots being on a target and just to make it more competitive in council-based fights. Absolute Corruption, same as before, and Siphon Life is also the same as before. 35 row here, Sow the Seeds, Phantom Singularity, and Vile Taint. These are both the same for the most part. Sow the Seeds has been reverted to its Legion form, which launches a total of 3 seeds, 2 additional nearby enemies, so a total of 3 if you take this talent. Unfortunately, with Sow the Seeds, Malefic Rapture and Sow the Seeds are very, very similar to one another. They both cost a Soul Shard, and for the most part, Sow the Seeds is just nowhere near as good as Rapture. You're going to be putting up your dots anyways, all the mobs. Agony, Corruption, Vile Taint, whatever, what have you, Unstable Affliction, and Rapturing regardless. And having 4 dot applications, 3 to 4, depending what you're doing, just beats Sow the Seeds, spamming Sow the Seeds. And you're also losing out on Vile Taint here in Mythic Plus, which is a dot effect on every single target, which increases your Rapture damage, number 1, and also the dot itself deals damage. Single target wise, Phantom Singularity is still where you're going to be, but we'll cover that in a little bit here. 40 row, once again, Dark Fury has had its radius increased by 2 yards. Coil is the same, and Howl of Terror has replaced Minor Circle, going baseline. For the most part, Coil is a very, very strong talent here, giving you a 20% heal on a 45-second cooldown. The 45 row here, Haunt is the same. I believe it had its duration increased actually from 15 to 18 seconds, I believe. Dark Caller is the new talent here, replacing Shadow's Embrace. Shadow's Embrace has gone baseline. However, you don't get access to that until you hit level 58 in Shadowlands. So for the most part, you won't have any kind of Shadow's Embrace play in pre-patch. However, Dark Caller reduces the cooldown of your Summoned Dark Lair by 60 seconds. This means that your Dark Soul Misery, if you take this, and your Dark Caller line up together perfectly every 2 minutes. This gives you a much better damage profile, I feel, in Mythic Plus, and it's just a strong talent all around in a lot of situations. Haunt, essentially the same thing, minor duration increase. There you go. Sacrifice's damage was buffed. It's still garbage. We don't take it. Just being real. Just being real here. Final row, we have Soul Conduit, Creeping Death, and Dark Soul Misery. They're all the same for the most part. We'll get into the talent builds in a little bit here, but all these talents are also the same. So I guess at this point, speaking of talents, let's take a look at single target and Mythic Plus builds for Affliction in pre-patch. Starting off with Mythic Plus talents for Shadowlands pre-patch, you're going to be playing a similar build to what you're playing for, I guess, the extent of BFA. Drain Soul in the first row here provides an insane amount of extra value in Mythic Plus due to shard sniping, everything that it brings for Affliction as a whole. The 25 row here, I've made the choice of Absolute Corruption. However, it's worth mentioning that Writhe in Agony is also a solid choice because it was buffed from a max of 15 stacks to 18, and also technically the Azerite trait Sudden Onset, which we'll get to a bit more here in a second, is also still around, providing more value there. I think Absolute Corruption, though, is going to be the play long-term for the majority of the players, I guess player base, because it just gives you an extra GCD instead of casting another seed. And being real, casting another seed of Corruption to refresh means that honestly you're losing out on 1 Rapture cast, and that's more relevant than 1 UA cast in BFA. 35 row, Vile Taint's the play here, an extra dot on every mob that deals damage. It also counts as an extra dot for Rapture on all the mobs. You really can't go wrong there. 45 row, Dark Caller is a great choice. It gives you a 2-minute damage profile in Mythic Plus as Affliction with your Dark Lair, and it syncs very well with Dark Soul Misery. And the final row here, rounding out Mythic Plus talents. As far as single target talents go, things are pretty similar once again to the way they were before. In the 15 row, once again, Inevitable Demise has replaced Deathbolt, so the de facto play here, I feel, is Drain Soul. Whether you're getting shard sniping value or not in single target fights, or I guess raid fights, depending on which one it is, it's still strong. The execute damage is undeniable. It's still a solid choice. 25 row, Siphon Life, 3rd dot, good damage dealt, and also, once again, it deals more damage because of multiple dot applications for Rapture damage. 35 row, Singularity is the play here over Vile Taint, I feel. Now, we had shifted a bit towards Vile Taint in the end of Nilotha, pre-Shadowlands pre-patch, because of Expedient, all the extra haste we were getting for shard generation. Vile Taint gave us that I guess, second ability a way to dump that 6th shard once you are capping in your Dark Lair window. Expedient's gone, and Singularity I feel is the better choice as well. It doesn't cost a shard. It gives you those Rapture windows every 45 seconds, and that's just the way the spec functions as a whole now. 45 row here. Dark Caller, Haunt, Sacrifice. Haunt is the play still here. Even with syncing your Dark Caller with your Dark Soul, you still have Condensed Life Force around as a major essence. So you still want that, you still have that big 3-minute damage profile in rating. So Haunt is still a play here, a 10% or 10% damage increase, and I believe it had its duration increased by a couple seconds too. It's just the best play when it comes to single target. In the final row here, once again, Dark Soul Misery. You'll sync it with your Dark Lair, your Condensed Life Force every 3 minutes. Just still a very solid option for Warlocks, Affliction Warlocks in single target. When getting into essences, I guess major essences for Shadowlands pre-patch, there are 2 to 3 that really stick out to me as the best choices. Condensed Life Force is still, in my opinion, going to be the one you want to play in single target. It will still require you to delay your Dark Soul for your Dark Lair in your 3-minute, just big cooldown window, but it's still a solid choice. It hasn't really been changed much in pre-patch, and it just is, I feel personally, the best single target choice that AF Warlocks have. Blood of the Enemy Major and Iris, I guess focusing Iris Major, are the 2 other choices here, and this is more or less the Mythic Plus build with a bit of a raid, I guess potential for raid as well, looking at the Blood of the Enemy Major build. Now, if you're playing Blood of the Enemy Major, you have a 2-minute build playing Dark Caller if you're playing that talent, which means that you're not really playing VOP and Dreadful Calling anymore, Azerite trait-wise. So, minors for these builds, I feel that focusing Iris is good if you're playing Blood of the Enemy Major. Breath of the Dying is probably still good due to the damage increase, and honestly, I think Lucid Dreams could be a solid choice here, because previously, having an extra shard or 2 for an extra Unstable Affliction didn't really mean a whole lot in Mythic Plus, and if you're single target with this Blood of the Enemy Major build, it didn't mean anything if you couldn't put up more than 5 Unstable Afflictions. You can Rapture more than 5 times in a row, so Lucid gains a lot of value here. If Lucid is not your choice, you don't feel like you want to rock that, you can play Crucible of Flame, other damage-based essences, Purification Protocols, probably not a terrible choice in Plus, but that's where I'm going to be looking to start with the Blood of the Enemy Major build replacing VOP Minor. To the same extent with the Iris Major build, if you're playing that in Plus, don't want to mess with Blood of the Enemy, Breath of the Dying Minor, Conflict and Strife Minor are solid options. Blood could be a solid minor too. And also Lucid Dreams. Now, personally in Plus, we'll get to this in a minute, I prefer the Blood of the Enemy Major build for the large 2-minute Dark Lair window with your Dark Soul, your Blood, your Dark Lair, and just massive Raptures. And at the same time, in raiding, if a boss is going to die before you get a second Condensed Life Force window, you can play Blood there too if it makes that much of a difference, if that 2 to 3 minute damage profile makes or breaks that fight. Now, you will be playing Dark Caller in that setting most likely, and not Haunt, so that might change things a bit. I suppose you could play the VOP Dreadful Calling build, but keep in mind, once again, VOP had its actual major cooldown reduction reduced from 25% to 10%. So, for the most part, Condensed Life Force, Blood the Enemy Major, Iris Major, all solid options. Conflict and Strife, Breath of the Dying Minor, Iris Minor, and Lucid Minor, also solid minor options for Warlocks. Now, when you're looking at Azerite traits for Warlocks in pre-patch, the big heavy hitters, Cascading Calamity, Racking Brilliance, they're still here. Up until last week on PTR, Cascading Calamity was not working at all. The wording on it technically says that casting an Unstable Affliction on your target while one is still rolling on it will give you a haste buff, but it just wasn't doing that. It wasn't proccing. That was changed last week, so Cascading Calamity essentially works the same way that it does on live right now. The cool thing is Unstable Affliction does not cost a shard anymore, so you can just straight up roll, 2 UAs in your opener, whenever, and get that haste proc without really losing 2 shards, in a sense, with Rapture being a thing. It's still solid. Cascading Calamity still works, provides a lot of haste, is a very solid option for Warlocks, both single target and AoE-wise. To a similar extent, Inevitable Demise, the Azerite trait, up until last week, was not working, in a sense, for Affliction in pre-patch. Now, ID has gone to a talent in the 15 row, which we just talked about, replacing Deathbolt. Previously, up until this week, the Azerite trait Inevitable Demise would deal damage and the talent would, but when you played them both together, the talent would override the Azerite trait, and you really wouldn't get a whole lot of damage. Now, they would stack separately buff-wise, but you just wouldn't see anything at all from the Azerite gear. Whether you're playing 1 stack, 2 stacks, or 3 stacks, nothing would override the actual talent's damage. However, in the most recent PTR build, this has been updated. They've combined the damage, so if you're playing multiple Azerite pieces and the talent, it gets you a lot of damage. It's a really strong trait when it comes to like multi-target AoE in the first place for Aff, and having that stacking damage amp, similar to sort of how like Drain Soul and Necrolord stacking sort of works, I guess worked until they nerfed it, in Shadowlands, is strong. I'm certainly keeping my ID in pre-patch. I think it could be exceptionally strong with the IE talent. The thing is, though, that sort of makes you take ID over Drain Soul, and, well, you know, Drain Soul is still very strong on its own. Heart of Darkness has been changed in pre-patch as well, which now gives you a baseline amount of stats, whether you have, well, I guess Corruption's gone, so you get those baseline amount of stats when you have Heart of Darkness. Now, the stats have been scaled back a lot. I think they've been scaled back a bit more proportionally than what they were previously with the stat squish being a thing. It's an option. It was never like our best option when it came to Aff in the first place, but it's still there if you need to fill a slot on your gear or have some old Nihilitha gear laying around that sort of works for you. The final Azerite trait here I want to talk about is Sudden Onset. Now keep in mind, Writhe and Agony was buffed from a max of 15 stacks to 18 stacks, so if you're playing a Mythic Plus build and really like playing Writhe and Agony over Absolute Corruption, Sudden Onset was a great choice before in BFA, and it's an even better choice now in Shadowlands pre-patch. So for Affliction's single target opener, there are a couple things that have changed in Shadowlands pre-patch. We talked about them a bit before, but number one, Unstable Affliction no longer costs a soul shard and has had its duration extended to basically 18 seconds, which means that as long as you have a bit of range between yourself and your target, you can pre-cast your Haunt and then essentially cast your Unstable Affliction, then going into the rest of your dots, your CDs, Dark Soul, Condensed Life Force, all that, into your Dark Lair, and then start Rapturing. Now, number two, the other difference is that while Shadow's Embrace has been moved to a baseline effect, keep in mind, we don't actually get that until level 58, I believe? 58. So, normally your opener in Shadowlands would be Drain Soul once you cast your Dark Lair 3 stacks, and then Rapture. However, we don't need to do that here. Just make sure to maintain your Haunt, because it's not there. So, like I said, as far as opening goes, pot, why not? We'll cast our Haunt, pre-cast Travel Time, go into Unstable Affliction, Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, Dark Soul, we'll CLF, I'll Zerking now, Singularity, Dark Lair, and honestly just Rapture here. Your Haunt's up, you just dump all your Raptures, and basically Affliction works around your Haunt dropping now, so be sure to refresh if you're going to Rapture again. Affliction works around having these 45-second windows, as long as you're playing Phantom Singularity, where you dump pretty much all of your soul shards. As long as you're not overcapping, there's not really a point in dumping them if you don't actually have to, unless you have your Singularity up. Once again, refresh Haunt here. And for the most part, outside of that, we're just draining. We're draining as our main filler. We'll refresh our dots because they're falling now. UA, Corruption, Siphon, Agony. We're sitting at 4 shards here with about 10 seconds off our Singularity, so I'll Rapture once. I don't want to overcap here. Haunt is falling again. That's fine. Start refreshing here. Haunt. We'll refresh UA and Siphon right about now. Singularity should be at about 5 shards. 4 or 5-ish. There you go. And just dump all your dots here, or all your Raptures, and basically you'll hold CDs again until your next Rapture window comes around every 45 or so seconds. Now, I did basically go into my Singularity CD there on cooldown, which, if you can do it, it's optimal, but it's not the end of the world holding your Singularity for a second or two if you need to refresh dots, or if your Haunt is falling. You don't really want to have to refresh your Haunt if you can avoid it in the middle of your Rapture window. You want to be able to dump as many Raptures as possible, and then just go from there. Once again, we're at 3 shards. I'll Rapture once here to not overcap before we get into our Singularity window. We know in about 5 seconds here, we're going to start refreshing, so I'll go my Corruption, Agony, Siphon, refresh UA, Haunt, Singularity. There you go, 4 shards, 5, and you just Rapture things down. Depending on shard gen, you can get 6-ish Raptures in a window here. Depending on shard gen, we can squeeze one more in. We're not playing Lucid Dreams Minor here, which does add the chance of Rapturing 7-8 times in a window and not having that Drain Soul cast. So it's important to keep that in mind. But for the most part, that's pretty much it. We still have Condensed Life Force as far as a minor essence goes in, or my major essence goes in Shadowlands. So we're still holding our Dark Soul for our Condensed Life Force. And when it comes back around again at the 3-minute mark, we'll pop our CLF, our Dark Soul, all of that again. And the good part is, Singularity should line up with your Dark Lair when you're playing Haunt. So it still works out pretty well, pretty similar to BFA, just Lucid Dreams gains more value in a sense, minor-wise, even though we're not playing it here, because unlike Unstable Affliction being our Soul Shard spender, you can cast 6, 7, 8 Raptures in a Dark Lair window. You couldn't cast 6, 7, 8 Unstable Affliction, so there's a lot of value to be gained there. So when it comes to Affliction AOE in Mythic Plus, heading from pack to pack, you mostly take Vile Taint, the talent here, as mentioned before, instead of Singularity. Vile Taint applies a dot to every mob hit. It's very similar to Rain of Fire placement, while also dealing damage to every mob from that actual dot. So you get more damage from your Rapture, and you get more damage from the actual Vile Taint dot. It's on a 20-second cooldown, however, it costs a Soul Shard. So it's essentially half the CD of Singularity, but you're using, once again, a Soul Shard. So we are playing Lucid Dreams Minor for this, just to sort of feel it out. But as far as things go, as far as like Shadowlands play has gone, depending on shard gen, I've normally been able to Rapture if a trash pack lives for a while, get a lot of Rapture value, I should say. Every Vile Taint window, however, like also holding for first Vile Taint, third Vile Taint, if you're going to live long enough, has given me more Raptures in that first, third, fifth window, etc. Regardless, as far as opening here goes, Dark Soul's off the CD, don't forget that. So I'll pop my Dark Soul, pre-cast Seed of Corruption, and just start putting agonies out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Go into my Vile Taint, put up my Unstable Affliction, Dark Glare, and I guess I start Rapturing here at this point. If you're playing Iris, you can Iris here. If you're playing Blood of the Enemy Major, you'll want to Blood of the Enemy pretty much before you start Rapturing here, right after your Dark Glare. And besides that, all you really do is just maintain dots. Your actual Vile Taints are falling here, but we dumped all of our Raptures, we're good to go. Put your Agonies back up, and look, Vile Taint is back around again. Like I said, we're not super high on shards here. Refresh our UA, so if the pack's gonna live long enough, more often than not, I'll end up just waiting to Rapture again in the next window. We are playing Lucid here, so we probably could dump a shard or so in that window depending on refunds. I'll actually dump one here. But we actually have Vile Taint coming around again essentially now, and we're in 4 targets as well, so it makes it a bit easier. But put that up, we have our UA rolling here, and just Rapture. Depending on Lucid refunds, you can get a pretty good bit of value here. Now, some people prefer playing Blood of the Enemy Major for the 2-minute Dark Lair build. Some people prefer playing Iris. I'll admit, I've played both. I probably at this point think Blood of the Enemy is a bit better. The cool thing is, previously with the Blood of the Enemy builds, you had to play a Dark Caller trait in like VOP Minor for all that to work. You don't have to anymore because you have Dark Caller, and Dark Caller gives you a 2-minute Dark Lair just right off the bat. Also, Vision of Perfection has been nerfed in Shadowlands pre-patch from a 25% cooldown reduction to a 10% one. But Dark Caller fixes all that. Essentially, every 2 minutes, if you're playing Blood of the Enemy, you run in, get your dots rolling, Dark Lair, Blood, and then just Rapture. And in AoE, when you're playing Lucid Dreams Minor 2, that's a huge, huge damage increase. Let's take a look briefly at how that would look. So we are going to start in melee here. I think it makes things a little easier for us because, hey, Blood of the Enemy. Now, for those of you who aren't super familiar with Blood of the Enemy, we're going to replace Iris here. We are playing Lucid. The Major, 1.5 minute cooldown, essentially 2 minutes with Dark Lair, Dark Soul, everything else. It is an explosion that gives you a 25% critical strike chance increase against the targets that it hits for 10 seconds, and your critical hit damage is increased by 25% for 5 seconds. So you'll want to pop your Dark Lair, and then Blood, start Rapture spamming. Now, if you get an early crit with a Rapture, obviously you're going to be in a great spot, but regardless, let's just take a look at how that would look in an opener. So, once again, pop, why not? We'll pop our Dark Soul, because it's off the GCD, it's at the beginning of the pack, more haste, bam, 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 get that rolling. Vile Taint, UA, we'll Dark Glare, Blood, and just Rapture. 5 Raptures, 6 Raptures. Sounds good to me. We burst to 12k there. Like, that's a pretty substantial... That's a lot of burst damage, man. That's pretty big. I haven't played with Blood of the Enemy in Plus, like, as much as I probably should have before, like, pre-patch everything hit. I'll actually cast Vile Taint again here. But I have to say, like, the damage here is impressive. Obviously, this is 4 targets. Blood deals damage. It was a Dark Lair opener. But still... it's pretty strong. Oh, and by the way, if you have a trinket like Manifesto or whatever you're using, a stat-based one, just pop it before you start Rapturing, and you're good to go. We have Singularity coming around here now. I'm sorry, Vile Taint, so we'll Vile Taint again. There it is, and just start Rapturing. Our dots are active long enough where we can get some value here. And just Rapture as much as you can. One more. Agony, agony, catch your agonies, and there you go. And that's pretty much AF AoE as a whole. It's pretty simple, but Blood of the Enemy brings a lot of value, and it's on a 2-minute CD. Like, you can see 24, 44, 52. You're good to go. You're going to be able to sync your Dark Soul with your Dark Glare again, and you might be holding Blood of the Enemy for 30 seconds, but honestly, that damage increase is worth it. If you can crit in the first few Raptures on these mobs, your damage is just insane as AF. Now, there are a couple important changes that I want to talk to you guys about for Affliction in pre-patch. Number one, like we mentioned, Malefic Rapture is your main soul shard spender now. If you guys have been watching Shadowlands beta progress, you'll know that Malefic Rapture is now affected by Mastery. Now, we are losing all of our corruption in pre-patch, but the one thing we aren't losing, well, a couple things, but one of the big things is every single piece of gear, as long as you've been running visions and optimize your character at this point, should most likely have a socket on it. Now, gems are devalued, but everything's devalued because we're squished to level 50 and not 120 anymore. So this gives Affliction Warlock a lot of potential extra mastery for those big Raptures. If you were watching beta streams early on, I guess in Alpha, when you had the degenerate socket gear from Burning Crusade and Wrath, everyone was running like haste and mastery, and your Raptures were hitting so incredibly hard. Affliction always scales really well with secondary stats, and if you have haste mastery gear and also sockets laying around, your Raptures are going to hit pretty hard. I'm looking at 65% mastery right now. I don't play, I mean, I have some haste mastery gear, but I don't have everything socketed for mastery. Everything's haste, you know? I have a lot of gear in the bank that I could straight up just put mastery on. This also might end up devaluing your manifesto a bit if there's like a mastery on use trinket or some kind of proc effect somewhere. It could change that around a bit. Now, sims aren't done yet at this point, so I don't know exactly, but it's important to keep that in mind. If you have any haste mastery gear that you're thinking of vendoring before pre-patch, keep it around. Or just mastery gear in general. Thanks, Rewar. I appreciate it. Number two is that damage-based effects like essences, Breath of the Dying, Condensed Life, Breath of the Dying, Crucible of Flame, Purification Protocol, the ones that deal damage. So one of the big things that made a difference for Affliction with those, and we sort of shifted away from Crucible of Flame usage in Nihilotha anyways, but one of the big things was that you had Haunt for a 10% damage increase, and you also had Unstable Affliction for a 10% damage increase. And that damage increase was not just, it wasn't just your dot damage. It wasn't just drain soul or whatever. It was everything. Your trinkets, your essences that were damage based. It increased everything. Unstable Affliction no longer has that 10% damage amp on it. It doesn't cost a soul shard anymore. And you might be thinking, okay, we still have Haunt. We do. We have Shadow's Embrace, but we don't have Shadow's Embrace. So you've lost that second extra, 9-10% damage amp. Now, like I said, sims in the end aren't done, and for the most part, we had sort of shifted away from, we really had the Crucible of Flame. We were still playing Breath of the Dying because it's just a good essence in the first place, but it's important to keep that in mind. Damage-based trinkets like Mount's Claw from Nihilotha are going to be devalued in a sense. One, because that ticks with extra haste, and hey, no more expedient. And number two, the damage-based effect doesn't have the Unstable Affliction damage amp anymore on it. So just keep that in mind when looking at your character, gearing-wise, trinkets, essences, all of that, heading into Shadowlands pre-patch. Thanks for watching, dudes. I hope this video gave you guys a better understanding of just how Affliction Warlock is looking heading into 9.0 and Shadowlands pre-patch. Now, like I said, a lot of Affliction lock, it feels pretty similar to the way that it's felt in BFA, but the shift from Unstable Affliction to Malefic Rapture being our main soul shard spender has really changed the toolkit, makes us better in Mythic Plus, AOE scenarios, just a lot of different places. I think it's better. It's a better place. Affliction's in a much better spot than it was in BFA. Once again, any weak auras, profiles, add-ons you see here are indeed available to you guys for free on my Twitch. If you want to swing by, drop a follow, hang out anytime, ask any questions, that is the best place to get a hold of me. Let me know what you guys think of this version of Affliction in the comment section below. Any questions, drop them down there as well. I'll be sure to get back to you. I have to admit, personally, this might not be Legion Affliction. My biggest wish is that our dots were dealing a bit more damage, maybe reducing the overall damage of Rapture a bit, both single target and AoE. But at the same time, I certainly like this version of Affliction more than the one we've had for the duration of BFA. Thanks again, dudes. If you want to see more content, be sure to smash the subscribe button below. Hit that like button down there while you're down there as well. And I'll see you guys again soon on stream. Peace.